egotistical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL Network.
Yes, that is right. We are here not to talk about SNL today, but to talk about an SNL alumni's new show that is Bupkis, right now available on Peacock. And we are here to talk through episodes 3 and 4 of this new series. Hey, everybody, my name is Jon from the Saturday Night Network. So excited to be back with you here every couple of days to talk through new episodes of Bupkis. If you missed it on Thursday, I was live with Sammy Kay to talk through episodes 1 and 2, which was a really fun time. Before that, I was live with Sammy and Amanda to talk about the show, all with Dave Sirus, one of the co-creators of the show and former writer at Saturday Night Live. So that was a great interview as well. And now we're here for episodes 3 and 4. We got the whole Bupkis crew with us. So first up, let me bring in Sammy Kay. Sammy, how you doing?
Jon, I'm doing well. You know, this is a big podcasting week for the 2/3 of us. So, you know, this is getting all my podcasting levels to the highest possible output to talk about episode 3 and 4 of Bupkis. Very excited to dive into this.
Absolutely. And joining us as well, it's so great to have you back on with us. It is Amanda Barkin. Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm good. I was feeling under the weather, so I missed you guys last night. So really happy to be back and excited to dive into the show today.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So if you missed it, when Sammy and I were talking about episodes 1 and 2, I believe we were pretty high on them. Definitely a tone shift between episode 1 and episode 2. I think for me, episode 2 was by far my favorite. Just love the mix of, hilarity, but then also the serious tone of what's happened in Pete's life, and then going back and really understanding who Pete is as a person. So that we talked all about in our first recap. And now we're here with episodes 3 and 4. I was so curious where the story was going to go. So let's do some overall thoughts on episodes 3 and 4, and then we'll dive into the details and recap both those episodes. So Sammy, 4 episodes into the show, halfway through, how are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling pretty good about Bupkis. Episode 3 and 4, very much more focused on the comedy aspects of Pete's life, not as much as episode 2 had more of a serious tone. The episode 4 stuff that we'll dive into with everything with Fast and Furious, as a big fan of that franchise, really scored points in my book. And then episode 3 dealing with kind of, the celebrity and fame aspects, that was interesting to kind of dive into. So, not sure how I'd rank all the episodes yet, but I'm liking what we're getting so far.
Yeah, so episode 3 was Picture, episode 4 was Crispytown. We're going to be talking about them in just a moment. But Amanda, would love to hear from you. So when we last spoke to you on the Dave Sirus interview, you have seen episodes 1 and 2. Now you're back and watching, and I've watched 3 and 4. So what are your thoughts halfway through?
So if anyone recalls, that one of the things that Dave said to us was that you're not really going to know what you're going to get. Every episode is going to be different, and kind of to expect the unexpected. And that has definitely been true, especially for episodes 3 and 4. I think that episode 2 has been my favorite as well for other reasons, but it's crazy. The cast is insane, and every episode is just exciting to see who's going to pop onto the screen next, because it's truly been such a wide variety of celebrity faces, and it has not stopped in episode 3 and 4. So excited to talk about it and break a lot of those cameos down.
Yeah, for sure. So many faces. It is a very exciting time. I think if you like shows where you never know what you're going to get, Bupkis is definitely that show for you. I mean, the through line is you're always going to get a good amount of Pete, obviously, but I think that there is, so every episode really does truly feel different, as Dave said. And personally, I don't always like that. I like to know what I'm getting in a show, and I like to be like, okay, this is a show that was made for me, and I like the tone to be pretty consistent throughout, and that's just who I am as a person. I'm very brand oriented. So when I fall in love with a TV show and it fits my style, I love the consistency from episode to episode. So it's weird for me to actually really enjoy a show that switches its tone so much. That's not something that's and I don't know if it's because I'm covering it or because it's just really that damn good, but I really feel like it's the first time in a long time I can think of a show that I absolutely don't know what I'm going to get from it, but seem to enjoy it. And I hope that if you are a listener and that is how you feel as well, that you're enjoying it just as much.
Does it help that you know that you don't know what you're going to get? Like, is it kind of like you know what you're going to get because you know that you don't know? Like, it's a brand. It's just, that's the brand.
I mean, look, I didn't take away from the interview with Dave that particular. I mean, it was a great conversation, and I tried to remember everything he was saying, but I didn't like take away from the interview being like, oh yeah, every episode's going to be different, and I wasn't necessarily mentally prepared for it. So when I watched episodes 1 and 2, I was like, whoa, those are two different episodes, and then I assumed that every episode after that would either be more like 1 or more like 2. But I do find that they're probably, if I had to lean one way, I'd say it's more like episode 1 is similar to 3 and 4. But I do think that 3 and 4 are uniquely different in every way. Like Sammy described how episode 4 is like alluding to like the Fast and Furious franchise. You know, that to me, it's like an action comedy in episode 4, which is not something you get from episode 1. So for me, I think that to answer your question, I don't know if the expectation would make a difference. I just think it's the pure quality of the show.
Fair.
Yeah. So let's get into these episodes that we have here, and we're going to start with episode number 3, which is Picture. And we do open in episode 3 on Amy Davidson in the kitchen hanging out, and then she gets a notification on her phone from TMZ that Pete Davidson, 29 years old, died in a car crash with articles everywhere. And you know, I don't know about you, Sammy, but I was watching this and I was like, oh, are we doing a whole episode on like what happens if Pete actually died? Like that's where my mind went right away.
Yeah, my mind immediately went to somebody on the show, whether it's Pete or Pete's mom is having a nightmare. And then we kind of pan over to Pete waking up. And, it turns out you're kind of made to think it might be a nightmare, and then it's actually happening. And I was not quite sure if it was going to be some sort of Twilight Zone-esque thing where it's like the ghost of Christmas Past, where Pete, is kind of seeing like what the world would be like if he were to die, and if they would have somebody kind of play that that character to kind of guide him through. But no, that wasn't the case. It was something more grounded in our reality where there's fake news, all the time, especially with celebrities. So I found that to be an interesting topic for them to dive into for this episode.
Yeah, Amanda, I mean, I know that there's just been so many things that have been written about Pete over the years. We have been through the entire journey as Saturday Night Live fans watching Pete's journey. But I can't remember a time where I've heard about a potential death for Pete, only just that he's had some like hardships and, people may have been worried about him, but not to this extent. So what were your thoughts when you saw that this was how we were opening up episode 3?
Well, I know that he'd been in a car accident recently, but I think that was after they wrote the episode. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But that was also my thought. I was kind of racking my brain, like, has this happened to him? Like, I feel like every year, like, Will Ferrell dies, but it's in like a hang gliding accident or something. So it's not really, something that probably worries his family. So I was immediately like, has this happened? Because as I understood, most of these episodes are loosely, although increasingly more loosely based on his life. 3 and 4, I feel like strayed a little bit more from things that we know about him from our following as SNL fans. But my mind also went where Sammy went. I thought it was like he was going to be reflecting on his life and his legacy if he were to die at 29. But then it didn't go that way at all. It went completely different direction, as I'm sure we're going to get into now.
Yeah, so he basically, we get to see Pete. He wakes up and then his phone is dead, so he has no idea what's happening. He goes down to the front desk. I believe he's staying at a hotel. Phone gets charged from a charging, like a portable charger from the front desk. Then he sees his mom has been calling him. Everybody's looking for him. And what he's focused on is not the fact that he died, but that there's a picture of him from 2015 that's being used for the article. And he absolutely hates this picture. So I would say, and this is going to come full circle later, we're going to talk about really the focus of the episode is this picture. But I would say this is a little bit relatable because I was like, I always find that everybody has like one photo of them that gets used for a million things. And then you start to like age a little bit and you're like, man, I really wish that this photo was not the photo that people knew for me. Even if you're not a big celebrity, like I still find that's a thing. So Sammy, I mean, I know you changed your photo with us this season, right? The little photo on the thumbnails.
Very relatable episode for me because of that small detail. That the photo that we see throughout the episode, that is, I immediately clocked it as like, oh yeah, this is something that I feel like maybe not articles today. Like there's way more photos of Pete out there now, but on this Wikipedia page, it's definitely for a long time, this photo was there. So I got a good chuckle out of that to see that this is kind of the driving force for Pete throughout this episode to try to figure out who is this troll that keeps showing this photo or changing his Wikipedia page and all that. But I do find that there have been like other SNL stars. I've noticed that you'll go on their Wikipedia page and it'll be like Rob Schneider at this red carpet in 2005. And it's like, you can't, does Wikipedia not have enough people on staff? I guess like I haven't been donating enough money to Wikipedia for them to update those pictures. But, definitely, I guess if you're a celebrity or an SNL podcaster, a somewhat relatable situation.
So back in the day, when I was in high school, Wikipedia was a free-for-all. It was just like whoever can put anything in there. Like it was never edited. There wasn't moderation the way it was. And I loved it. As somebody who started this show as SNL stats, like and putting stuff, like I loved writing stuff into Wikipedia. Like I wasn't one of those trolls that like deleted a page and then wrote like a bunch of crazy stuff. But I would always want to put like when I knew something, I would always put it in. I remember like watching old episodes of 24 and being like, oh, I need to put in like this character's information and stuff. Like I was that nerdy guy. And so I can tell you that I like back in the day in high school, I remember creating Wikipedia pages or like putting stuff on the wiki and putting in photos of people and stuff like that. But now it's gotten so moderated, it's really hard to make changes. So sometimes I'll go on SNL pages and I'll see stuff that's wrong, and I'm like, I want to change it, but I know that I can't. Amanda, any relation to this whole storyline?
Well, I just looked. It is his Wikipedia page. That
is
this photo is.
It's his Wikipedia. I wonder if we had checked on Wednesday if it had been a more current photo, and then somebody has gone in and changed it since.
Okay, so mine is Pete Davidson in 2013, not 2015. You guys have. Okay,
hold on,
you're
I'm
on
checking.
Pete Davidson. Wait, this is very weird.
Okay, so I can't show you, but like the box to the right, it's 2013. And the 2015 is below. But when I look at the Wikipedia thumbnail, like when I scroll just on the Google results, that's the photo.
Okay.
So
let me see if I can get this on screen with all of us so we could take a look all together. So yeah, let me put this up. So basically, here's the photo evidence that we have here. If you're watching on YouTube right now, we have Pete's Wikipedia page on with us. But basically, in this corner right here, we have the Pete 2015 photo with the squinty eyes. And then, see, I thought it was this photo, the one in the top right here, but this is actually even worse. This is from 2013, not 2015, so 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah. That 2015 photo of Pete is so interesting because it's post him joining SNL. And I know that he was obviously young when he joined the show, but he looks really young and, kind of green in that picture.
Yeah, I mean, like, no offense to Pete, but I think he's aged like 20 years in 10 years. It's like
celebrity life.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, a lot of the talk here is about this famous picture from 2015 where he's squinty, and it starts off where Pete is basically, his mom's all worried. He calms her down and says, "I need to go to this conference." So he goes to this Tomorrow's Future conference, which we actually got to hear from Dave Sirus on the interview. Was a real thing. He got to meet Al Gore in real life at a conference like this. So here's the conference on Tomorrow's Future. He comes on right after Jon Stewart, who great cameo here, walks off, says, "Don't mention global warming. It's a very touchy subject," which I thought was a great line here. And then Al Gore is there introducing Pete Davidson, who is supposed to come on. But as he's on stage, he gets completely diverted from what he was going to say because he turns around and they are using the 2015 photo. So, Sammy, were you excited to have Jon Stewart and Al Gore here?
Oh, absolutely. And then later on in the episode, we'll get to Charlie Day. The amount of guest stars, as we've mentioned in the interview and throughout our coverage here, it's amazing to see how many people show up. And sometimes you're watching an episode of the show and you're expecting like, all right, we get Al Gore. That's going to be it. This is going to be the Al Gore episode. And then they throw you a Jon Stewart, and then they throw you a Charlie Day. And it's, I don't watch Jon Stewart's new Apple TV show. So whenever he shows up in something I'm watching, I'm like, nice. It's like a warm blanket. It's Jon Stewart on my TV playing himself and having so many great lines. I love the line that he said about saying how I think Gore's drunk, and he doesn't even recycle, and there's all this banter back and forth, which makes me wonder when this was written or filmed, where I feel like they're taking some shots at some of the Kanye stuff with saying how Jews run the world. And, there's that back and forth between Pete and Jon saying, don't run for president. Don't run for president. It feels very, Kanye related. So I, got a good kick out of all that.
Yeah, and don't forget the famous line from Jon Stewart here. It's my anniversary. Can I borrow your cock? So, which we got to see in the trailer a little bit. So
I wanted
Amanda,
to let you read that one on my.
Yes.
I was going to read it personally, but okay. That's okay. I really liked that. I thought about Kanye immediately, and that was brilliant. I love Jon Stewart, and I know that him and Pete are buddies. I know that when Jon Stewart got the Mark Twain Award, that Pete gave a speech, and when I feel like Pete's just friends with all the elder comedians in the respected circle. So I expect to see more. Yes, it was great. It was honestly, and I love Al Gore, so that was funny and wild and just exciting. I'm so shocked that Pete cares, or that Pete's character cares about this photo. I mean, I understand it's relatable to have something in your head and have it just bother you. Once it just gets in your head, you kind of maybe blow it out of proportion because you're just fixated on it. As opposed to maybe other problems you're having in your life, it's easy to tackle one discrete problem. But I was just kind of surprised that maybe he cares more than we otherwise thought about these kinds of press photos.
This kind of tracks the version of Pete we're seeing in this show. Earlier in other episodes, he's talked about how he wants to, get rid of his tattoos and present more of a mature image, or everyone thinks he's kind of a joke. So I found this to kind of be in line with at least the version of the Pete persona that he's presenting on this show, to where he doesn't want people to see this picture of him from when he was from 2015, when he was a young kid just kind of starting out. He wants to maybe be taken a little bit more seriously as a comedian, but still be taken a little more seriously.
Yeah. So we do find out that it is I'm a Scatman 76 who keeps putting up this 2015 profile picture or Wikipedia picture. It's really bothering Pete. He wants to figure out who this is. Anyways, so Pete goes to therapy and he gets to meet Dr. Rossi, who is Charlie Day, the great Charlie Day. Sammy, I know you're a big fan of Charlie Day, right?
Yeah, big fan of Charlie Day. Really enjoyed when he came to SNL and host. And this kind of goes back to the question I asked Dave during our chat about having people or having celebrities play themselves versus characters on the show. When I saw Charlie Day on the cast list, my first assumption was he's going to play Charlie Day. And I don't know if Charlie Day and Pete in real life have a friendship or something like that, but I was pleasantly surprised to see him playing this therapist character that we later on find out is taking advantage of Pete. But we'll dive a little bit more into that in a bit.
Yeah, can I also say, if you've never seen Charlie Day's episode of SNL, you have to go back and watch the crime scene sketch, which is good. Just, to me, an all-time classic sketch. So great, from season 37. But yeah, Amanda, what about you? Were you excited to have Charlie Day here as the therapist?
Yes. Same thought as Sammy. I was like, oh, he's playing a character. Interesting. They must think he has, good character acting chops. Although I do feel like his character was very reminiscent of the persona that I know him as, Charlie Day. So it was just kind of a different hat, but still the same. I wouldn't say he was necessarily playing a character the way that Steve Buscemi was. I think he was still kind of playing himself. Do you agree?
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I love Charlie Day, but when you do a show like Always Sunny, where your character is named Charlie and it's on for 15 years, it's going to be hard to separate that character from Charlie Day and something else. But I thought it was fun to play up that persona in this role.
Yeah, so we have Pete with Dr. Rossi here and talking about the picture and the death threats and all this, or not death threats, the being dead and all of this stuff. And then, really great speech here from Charlie Day's character, saying, it must have felt good to see how many people cared about you. And Pete, you shouldn't be getting mad at things you can't control. Pete talks about how he's a sensitive guy. So there are some serious elements to this. And ultimately, Dr. Rossi says, you got to take control of your life. Don't go online and pretend that the photo doesn't exist. So Pete walks away from therapy feeling really good about this whole thing. Meanwhile, Amy Davidson is talking to Evan. We get to meet a little bit more of, I guess, Pete's friend / assistant, Evan, here. And, Amy telling Evan that Evan's been distracted and not really helping out Pete. And, this thing wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Evan, not being on the ball. And Evan says he wants to get engaged to his girlfriend, and they start talking about that. So there's a really cute scene there. But ultimately, it leads to Amy wanting to help. So we see for the first time, Amy in her role as a guidance counselor, talking to some kids at school, helping to find out who I'm a Scatman 76 is, and she wants to get involved and help here. So we did get a nice little B plot here of Amy's relationship with Pete. And that's going to come together in a little bit. So Amanda, what were your thoughts on, I don't think we even heard from you since the start, since we started watching the show, of how you're feeling about Edie Falco as Amy and what we're going to see from her here?
Oh, she's brilliant. So far, she's my favorite part of the cast. And I like this version. I like the character that she's playing. She's like got a little bit of an edge to her, which I wasn't necessarily expecting from Pete's mom's character. Like, I feel like she's like a little bit more devious than I would have guessed that she was going to be playing the character. So I enjoy that. Like, I like the meddling aspect. I think it's fun. It's a fun plot. And I like her kind of cornering, Pete's boys when he's not out to like try and get it. It's just relatable. I could see my mom doing that, and I enjoy it a lot. And Edie's just been unbelievable.
Yeah, Sammy, you agree?
Yeah, she's absolutely killing it. She has a great sort of B plot as well in the following episode that I'm excited to talk a little bit more about.
Right. So Pete meets with Grandpa Joe. We get to see Joe Pesci for the first time in episode number 3. They're smoking at the park, hanging out. And Joe really, Poppy, he really puts the screws on him and says, instead of listening to your therapist, I don't know why you're going to the therapist, instead go after the guy and be the big dog, fight back. So he says we should go get Uncle Roy. We should go get the guy. And, it ends up, motivating Pete to want to go do something about this. So we flash forward to Pete in his basement with some of his friends, and this is the first instance of our friend Dave Sirus appearing on the show with his Klingon sword, or glaive, as he's cutting some fruit here. And it's a fun time getting to see Dave Sirus on the show, and it's not the only time we're going to get to see him in these 2 episodes. Amanda, very cool to have Dave be a part of the show.
Yeah, he's great. I feel like he really downplayed his acting skills in our conversation with him. His deadpan is amazing. I feel like I really got to know who he was as part of the gang immediately. Like, I can see where he fits in. I thought he was great. I was really excited. Like, I mean, we just spoke to him last week, but I felt like watching a friend like appear in a TV show. And it was really exciting for me. So he was great.
Yeah, and we get to see, Dave sort of alluded to the fact that he's a very nerdy guy, and we get to see this really played out throughout the entire time that he's on the show. So he described the heightened version of himself, and then we get to see that. So they're having some fun, and then Amy Davidson is going to text Evan to say that she found out who I'm a Scatman is. I'm a Scatman 76, and they're going to go after the guy. So Pete grabs the sword or the glaive and jumps in the car and drives off, and Amy's not so happy about this. So Amy ends up finding Pete, says, "What are you doing? Are you going to kill the guy? Like, you can't do that." And they end up going on a stakeout together, and there's this nice bonding moment here in the car between Amy and Pete, where she's talking about how she's always worried that he's actually gonna die, and this is how it's gonna happen, is she's gonna get a text or something from TMZ. She's always worried about him, and Pete is asleep and not taking this all in. So it's nice to see them interacting with each other, but it is a good scene ultimately that's gonna culminate in finding out in a moment who I'm a Scatman 76 is. So Sammy, what do you think of all this?
The conversation between Amy and Pete in the car was a nice kind of look at their relationship and their dynamic. Obviously, we've seen a little bit of that in the first 2 episodes. The beat where she's kind of finally professing how she's feeling about everything, kind of tying back to the beginning of the episode, and then to find him be asleep. It's a beat that you're kind of expecting to see, but found that to be effective. And then we kind of see, as you alluded to, kind of what the big reveal is, a reveal that the twist I was not expecting to see with Charlie Day. Are you going to set that up?
That's what I was going to ask you. Did you,
Yeah.
So you were definitely on the side of like, this was not something you expected. You thought this was going to be a random person we hadn't seen before.
Sometimes I forget how TV works or how episodic TV works, where if you bring someone in like Jon Stewart or Charlie Day, it could just be a cameo in a show like this. Jon Stewart playing himself would have been kind of a crazy twist to see him, like, for some reason being the troll if he was I'm a Scatman 76. But I really thought it was just going to be some random person, or maybe somebody that was in Pete's entourage, which is kind of a storyline that we see in the next episode with somebody being a rat. So yeah, I kind of forgot how TV worked there in the second, where if you introduce somebody like Charlie Day as a therapist, you might want to tie them back in as the troll later on. I found that to be very surprising, was not expecting that. And even as they were revealing it, I'm like, I know this is a heightened kind of reality show, but the way it was kind of resolved, I was like, okay, this is like an interesting way to deal with this. But the bit that Charlie keeps doing when it's revealed that he is the troll, to just kind of, get more time scheduled on his planner. He's like, well, let me just pencil you in here, and Thursday's good for me, and if you want to cancel now, I got to charge you. So I found that all to be very funny.
Amanda, did you expect this was the way they were going to resolve that story?
I did. I hate to be that
She's smarter
person,
than
but
me.
I did. I just was thinking, I know that the show is not based on Curb, but I have Curb in my mind where everything is kind of full circle. And that hasn't necessarily been the case in other episodes, but I had a feeling. But I just started going to therapy, and I was thinking, like, wait, I don't know where my therapist went to school. Like, should I ask? Should I find? I assume she did go to college and whatever grad school, but I had no idea. Especially, Pete's like in his office. My therapist is on Zoom, so like it's not like I can see her like credentials or anything. But I was thinking, like, oh, like, should I find out where she went to college? Like, I'm sure she did, but I thought that was
Do you
like a funny
believe
bit.
that your therapist is the one causing the problems in your life?
I do not. That would be pretty incredible if she was. But that was just ridiculous. And then how Pete at the end is like, oh, like he's good. Like that was like the conclusion. Like, okay, see you Thursday. Ridiculous.
Right. So if you didn't watch this, basically we find out that Dr. Rossi is not only I'm a Scatman 76 who's posting this picture consistently online, but he's also the one who made the fake death announcement to push him to continue to go to more therapy. So this is a very, funny interaction. When I think of Charlie Day, I just think of manic. Just so incredibly crazy, and we got this moment where he just turns into the crazy Charlie Day, and I think that was kind of fun. I definitely did not expect this. I thought it was just going to be like some kid, because to me the Jon Stewart and Al Gore cameos were so brief that I didn't think about the full circle moment like you, Sammy. So I was like, oh, it's just going to be some kid or whatever, and Pete's going to realize it's like a young kid at home who's probably like just like him. Like that's how I would have like figured it would be written. It's like, this is a younger Pete Davidson, and he's like, oh, what I'm getting mad at this kid who doesn't really have a full grasp on how life works and all that stuff like that. But it turns out it was a very funny sitcom style moment. So totally get that. But I think that the nice, point of all this really is just he realizes, through his conversation with Dr. Rossi that his mom, like he's completely neglecting how his mom feels about the entire situation. And he looks back and his mom is like, where did he go? She's trying to find him in the car. Like she's worried that he just went and killed somebody. And ultimately Pete goes back and says to Amy, like, like, let's just hang out and spend some time together. She says that's all she wants. And, there's this really, in a weird, like a very twisted line where he says, I promise I won't kill myself until after you're dead.
That's the dark kind of humor that I enjoy.
Yeah. And we've heard this sentiment from him before. What I thought was interesting is that they were kind of suggesting that, like, oh, he needs to spend more time with his mom. Because to me, Pete is so inextricably linked to his mom. I feel like his stand-up and his, like, weekend update features have always mentioned his mom since the beginning. Like I think of Pete's mom when I think of Pete, like a few beats behind every time. So
Yeah.
and he lives with her at this point. So
Yeah, it'd be tying into the moment in time where we're seeing this version of Pete Davidson kind of ascending in fame. And even in the first episode, she kind of gets upset with Pete about how he's never home anymore. And I think that is all tying in these, very, under the surface themes throughout these episodes. There's a bit of a through line you can kind of pick up and hold on to, which I appreciate.
Yeah, and the episode ends with them driving off, listening to one of Pete's dad's favorite songs, and we get this flashback to, within the show, we see the actor who is playing Scott taking a picture of the young Pete Davidson who is squinting, and it's like a full circle moment to his picture that he took in 2015, and his father says, "Pete, you're way more handsome with your eyes open." So it's a nice full circle moment that is really, to me, more connected to episode 2 than episode 1. So I think that I would say if I just watched episode 3, I'd say episode 3 is probably a blend of the first 2 episodes in a way. It has like nice touching moments, but it also has that fun comedy and cameos that we got in episode number 1. So this to me was a good episode. I think number 4 that we're going to get to in a moment is probably more action packed. So you guys ready to move on to the 4th one?
Definitely.
All right, let's do it. So episode number 4 opens up with Pete meeting with his agent, and he is there. And like I said, this episode is called Crispytown. So Pete is there meeting with his agent, talking about how they recently pulled him from being in the new Fast and Furious movie because he was photographed doing whippets at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And Amy and Evan are both there saying, you got to get your act together. We're gonna help you, Pete. You got to find a way to get into this. And basically, what happens is Vin Diesel's daughter is having a party on a yacht in Florida. And the way that he's going to get into the movie is they need to prove that Pete can show up on time and do his job here. So the only way to do that is to send Pete on a trip to Florida. Amanda, this sounds like a crazy idea.
Yeah, I mean, I just immediately, they were like, Edie's like, oh no, Florida, like that's like Pete's kryptonite, which I thought the whole Florida of it was very funny. My parents moved to Florida recently. I think Florida is an insane place. I don't love going, but it's interesting to go, and I just loved the whole Florida of it. So that was exciting to me, and I kind of like understood right away, okay, this is going to be like a Florida episode. So.
Yeah, and Sammy, Pete's agent is played by Chris O'Donnell here, very famous actor, and we're going to have a lot of cameos in this one as well. But what do you think about the premise for episode 4?
Yeah, like I alluded to at the beginning of this podcast, I'm like a big Fast and Furious fan. What'd you say?
You're a big Florida person?
I thought you were going to say like I'm a big whippets person, which is not true. I didn't know where you were going with that. Not a big Florida person, not a big whippets person, big Fast and Furious person. So the idea,
I thought they all went together, all 3. No,
yeah, never leave home without them. But the premise was like very fun. Definitely some Universal, NBC, Peacock synergy with Fast and Furious being a property of Universal. That's my cynical brain working, but there's a lot of funny lines. I actually did not realize it was Chris O'Donnell in that part. In the entire time, I was like, who is this person? I'm sure I'm going to look it up after and know who it is. He played Robin in the 90s Batman movies. So, and then we get another superhero reference here with the Avengers, asking if, he did whippets with the Avengers. And he says how, it was the original Avengers, so, that's cool, right? And I'm thinking, is this like a Scarlett Johansson reference? Because obviously he has a relationship with Kyle Jost. Sure, he has a relationship with ScarJo as well. So I found that to be very fun. And I did not expect to see this episode turn into a Fast and Furious movie. So that was unexpected and a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's Fast and Furious style, I would say for sure. But Amy's very concerned about him going down to Florida, so she ends up putting a tracking device on Pete, and also sends Grandpa Joe, Poppy, and Uncle Roy with them. So they're all going to go down to Florida together. I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast before, but back in the day, I think it was, I'm going to say the end of 2012, beginning of 2013, I took a bus with 3 friends down to Florida from Montreal. And we were staying there for like 2 weeks, and we got a place in Florida that we rented, and it was like Christmas break, and we were all like young and single, and it was like, whatever. But like that was the bus ride was the most insane experience of my life. I know they weren't doing like public transportation, but I'd say like just like the road trip down to Florida thing, I was like, wow. The cast of characters that we met along the way as we had to switch buses and get further south and all this stuff. It was supposed to be like a 30-something hour drive that turned into something closer to 50 because we ended up, I think we were in Savannah, Georgia, and our bus driver ended up driving into a ditch in a construction site, and we all had to get off the bus, and it was a whole thing. Anyways, yeah, there's always a crazy story anytime you drive down to Florida. And Sammy, I was joking, but I know you've been to Florida many times. Have you ever done the drive?
I personally have not done the drive, but my dad has done the drive many times with me and my sisters in the car when we were very young, and it feels like you're in the car forever. And I'm coming from Michigan, which is a little closer than, to Florida, barely, but closer to Florida than your trip. And I can't imagine taking public transportation. That sounds absolutely terrible. But,
we thought it would be funny. Like that,
yeah.
There was like,
so it was like
I don't know why.
It was a bit. It was
all. We did it for the bit.
Yeah, it was all a good bit. Yeah, Florida is a crazy place, and as Amy says, Florida is everything wrong with Pete in one state.
Right, exactly. Amanda, do you have any fun Florida trip stories?
I have driven down to Florida with my parents a few times, and I've driven to Colorado. Like, I've done a lot of driving. I hate it. I do not. My first thought was, why the hell are they driving? I have no idea. Pete Davidson can surely afford to fly his crew down. His grandfather, who's dying, is going to now sit in the car for 60 hours round trip to get a sandwich. Yeah, crazy. What kind of car was that they were in? I was like, I don't even know what kind of vehicle this is. But like with like very, very high ceilings, it was very confusing to me.
A high end commercial van for, it's like the private jet equivalent of vans.
And they couldn't even have a driver. Like he had to have his like grandfather's friend driving and switching off, like who was sitting.
Which was hilarious, by the way.
Yeah, amazing. But I'm like, how is this the efficient way for him to spend his time to get down there for an afternoon gig? I don't know.
That I had honestly, I did when I was watching this, I did not have all these questions, but now I'm going back and I'm thinking, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it did give us the opportunity to see Uncle Roy again, who is becoming my favorite character on this series. So great to have Brad Garrett back here and having like a bit of a back and forth with Dave Sirus that we later see, at the very end of the episode, which I thought was like maybe the funniest part of this whole thing.
Definitely. So this is a really funny road trip. I think that we get to see different variations. All these new friends of Pete suddenly pop up out of nowhere, where we get former almost SNL cast member Shane Gillis here, which is really, I know he's like a big part of the stand-up comedy circuit. He's friends with a lot of these people now, but very interesting here. Gilly is here on the trip with them as well. We obviously also get to see Dave Sirus, but a bunch of new friends there. Sammy, how did you enjoy seeing Shane Gillis a part of this particular group of friends joining the road trip?
Really putting me on the spot there. I have a friend. Well, I have a friend, my best friend, huge Shane Gillis fan. Not of, things that he has said on podcasts, but there have been many times since the whole debacle with him almost joining SNL and then not joining SNL to where he's shown me a Shane Gillis sketch and I'm like, this is hilarious. It's just in a vacuum, objectively hilarious, and was very interesting to see him pop up in this episode. They kind of, later on, use, I don't know if they're using his persona, but he kind of ends up being a villain, or he ends up being, a negative force in this episode. But, am I allowed to say I was excited? Like I knew that he was announced for the show. So I was like, oh, wow. Like that. I was curious to see how they were going to bring him in. And I do think he contributed a lot of funny bits throughout this episode.
Yeah, so if you weren't in the loop on this, back in 2019, season 45, the show hired Bowen Yang, Chloe Fineman, and Shane Gillis to the cast. And it was pretty, interesting to get to see all the reactions to this. Obviously, as SNL fans, I mean, we weren't on the air at that point. We weren't podcasting. It was 1 year prior. But, everybody's going to go and research all these people and find all their bits to find out what's going on here. And we end up having that a lot of, the SNL community went online and found clips of Shane Gillis's podcast at the time where he was making ethnic slurs about Chinese people. And they did a lot of like rankings of comedians by race and gender and stuff like just like big no-nos and ever, but like especially now. And I think it took a few days, but eventually Lorne Michaels came out and said that Shane would not be a part of the cast, which is really crazy because not only was it sort of unprecedented for modern times, but it was just like SNL's first time sort of taking a stand in a certain direction or not, or being like what's okay and what's not okay with behavior and conduct when in terms of how to become an SNL cast member. So this was a pretty huge deal. And in the history of the show, I mean, there's really only been a few occasions where a cast member was like almost a cast member, and I could only think of like Catherine O'Hara, who stepped aside for other reasons. But it's just it's crazy. And obviously he's become pretty good friends with Pete Davidson, and he's on the show there. So Amanda, did you like seeing Shane Gillis as a part of the crew?
Well, I did not know who he was until just now, so I'm processing a little. My gut reaction is like, there are so many funny people. Why do we have to platform people who have a history of being racist? That's my general feeling about SNL hiring him and about Pete, giving him this role and this time. So I didn't know that. I didn't put two and two together. I did know about him and I did know about that hiring debacle, but I have not followed his comedy since. I don't love it. There's a million people that he could hire. Pete's friends, like I just said, with seemingly every comedian. Why choose to give somebody a role that has done this before publicly? But that's all I have to say.
I don't disagree with what you're saying for what it's worth, but I also just do want to, I have to be fair to my thoughts and feelings on it as well, which is like, I sort of agreed with the sentiment at the time, which is maybe he's not meant to be an SNL cast member at that point and still has more growing to do. And I wouldn't necessarily go back and hire him now as a cast member, but I do, I do believe people can grow, people can get better and can learn from their experiences, especially when they're exposed and put in the spotlight. So like, I wouldn't necessarily, I'm not a proponent of like cancel culture in terms of that somebody says the wrong thing at one point that they should like never be able to like get work or recover and get these types of roles in the future. So I don't necessarily feel like he shouldn't be a part of Bupkis and all that stuff. I just think it depends. Like I don't think you can necessarily like know what's truly in somebody's heart versus like what they say on a podcast a few times and stuff like that. So I don't disagree with the thought or sentiment that you're saying, Amanda. I just think that like I think it's been a few years. I would hope that he's grown and is like a better person at this point. But I also understand people who would feel exactly like you do, which is that what he did was extremely offensive and they would rather enjoy the art that Pete's putting out there without having this guy on their screen.
Did he issue some kind of meaningful apology, obviously written by a publicist, but is there even like a record of that?
Honestly, I don't think so. Maybe the other people would know better than me, and maybe that is probably a good reason to not have him on the show. But from what I understand, and at least from what's been written about, going back to the Wikipedia of it all, what's written on there is just he sort of like stood by saying like, I would apologize to anyone who's been offended, but I'm a comedian who pushes boundaries and all that stuff. I just think he's the type of person that's just like, sometimes there are comedians who decide to go in a direction and stick to their guns on this stuff. Sammy, any input on this conversation?
No, let's move on.
Okay. All right. Let's do that. All right. So Shane Gillis is here as well. He ends up playing a big role in this one. We get a very fun scene with Dave Sirus, who ends up sitting up front with Uncle Roy, and they're talking to each other and they're bonding as well. And Uncle Roy says, "You're, very, very interesting man." But part of the conversation is because when they get down to Florida, there's paparazzi that are there to greet them at the hotel, and Poppy, Grandpa Joe, realizes that there must be a rat in the group. Somebody must be leaking where they're going to the press. So right away, we get to meet this new character played by famous SNL cameo from last season. Simon Rex is here. He's playing Crispy, and Crispy's going to come. He's going to punch out some paparazzi. He's there under the fake names Tostito Jones. Oh no, sorry, that's Pete's fake name. Pete's fake name is Tostito Jones, where he's staying. He's like, how did that get leaked? But basically, the paparazzi's there. Simon Rex gets them up to their suite, the Kid Rock suite, and Crispy says, "You guys, tomorrow, you got to come down. You got to see my place. I have the best jewelry in South Florida, way better than Lou's Diamonds. You got to come to Crispy's." So we finally meet this character who ends up playing a very big role in this episode. Sammy, did you like Simon Rex's role?
I loved this. I'm not going to go out and say I'm a huge Simon Rex fan. The thing I probably know him the most pre his film Red Rocket that came out, I think a year or two ago, was Scary Movie 3. And I think he makes an appearance in Scary Movie 4. And I mean, I loved the scary movies as a kid.
Me too.
And he's been involved, or his public persona over the years has kind of been an interesting thing to track. And he perfectly embodies this character as this kind of shady character you would see in Florida. I found this performance to be kind of a cocaine-fueled, energetic, somebody that Pete, a celebrity could kind of encounter in their life, and I found that to be just a very positive addition to this episode.
Amanda, how do you feel about Crispy being added to the mix?
I like Simon Rex. I have to confess that I'm not a big Fast and Furious fan, so I feel like this is not necessarily. I know. I mean, I just thought it better to get it out there than to pretend, because I feel like you could see through if I was disingenuous about it.
Yeah.
So I was like a little bit like, okay, this is not going to be for me. Let's just like ride it out. But I thought that Simon Rex was really redeeming. I thought he was really funny. And I was kind of expecting this kind of character from him when I saw that he was listed. This is like kind of the vibe that I get from him. Like the like coked out Florida open, Hawaiian shirt. That's what I expected. And that is what we got.
Yeah, we did. And so the next morning, Pete's going to wake up. He sees that Dave Sirus has a black eye, wakes him up, was locked out of his room, doesn't know what's happened. So we'll put a pin in that for a minute. And we're going to see that they are all deciding, instead of going straight to the yacht trip, they're going to go over to Crispy's. Poppy doesn't think that they should go, but they want to see Crispy's diamonds. They end up going to this little store, and they're looking around. It's kind of a sketchy place. And then Crispy says, no, you got to check out my other place. So they end up going a 2-hour drive to a big warehouse. And this sort of becomes from a very realistic episode to a very unrealistic episode, as we start to see that the paparazzi have followed them to Extra Crispy's compound. And I will say, we stop for a moment to meet Crispy's father, who's very, very upset with Crispy.
Strange character.
Very strange character. We find out Crispy's real name is Ben Gluberman, which is just a very classic Florida move. This guy who just is all pompous and doing all this stuff, but he's really a Ben Gluberman inside. I thought that was it was very like John Ralphio. That's what I compared it to.
Yeah.
Did you feel that way, Sam?
I love Jon Ralphio.
I did not clock that, but yeah, the person who kind of gives off this, larger than life energy that is more successful than they actually are, trying to always, kind of make a deal or, take advantage of a situation, be an entrepreneur. Definitely got some Jon Ralphio vibes. Really quickly, I did want to mention, when they're back in the kind of the shady, Crispy shop before they go to the compound, a very funny line that I wrote down was like, yeah, this place is like 5 minutes away. I can get you there in 20 minutes, this is even before we find out that it takes them 2 hours to get there. And that logic makes absolutely no sense. And I found that to be very funny.
That was great. So Pete and Crispy get in this really nice car. They decide they're going to drive away from the paparazzi. Then all of Pete's entourage, all of the friends, they all have their own fancy cars that they're going to get into. They're going to follow along. And it's this huge chase that's going on. I think one of probably my funniest line in the whole 4 episodes was seeing all of Pete's friends talking to each other from car to car. And before they even said it, I was like, how are they talking to each other? And then they all realized that like one of them makes a comment. They're like, I don't know how we're all speaking to each other, but we just are. Like, that was so great.
That was fantastic. Yeah. And as I was saying, as a huge Fast and Furious fan, the second you see that Dodge Charger, that red car, whatever it is, I'm like, are they going to turn this into a mini Fast and Furious movie? And that's absolutely what happens. And another like very underrated thing that I found to be funny about this whole ordeal was when they initially get to the compound, Crispy's dad is, this very kind of creepy, intense, like, oh, don't touch anything in my compound. And immediately once Crispy and Pete take off in the car, he's like, he starts throwing everybody keys, like throwing everybody keys to all the other vehicles. Like, that makes absolutely no sense. But he's like, come on, chase after them. That made absolutely no sense. And I loved every second of it.
It was so funny. Yeah, this was a great scene. And then, they're on this chase, and basically, Crispy's going to take out the gold gun, start shooting at the paparazzi, starts killing the paparazzi. All of a sudden, he's going to take out this, what he calls a Nick Cannon bazooka, and ends up really just exploding the paparazzi. And it was just a crazy scene. Ultimately, they're going to end up going back to the yacht area, and, Pete's going to puke after, they realizing they just killed someone. He's like, that's it, no more drugs. Like, it's just the crazy Florida scene that you would totally expect. But it ends up culminating in Pete going back and seeing Poppy, who, for me, by the way, the scenes between Poppy and Roy, who are not with them, where they're enjoying some pickles and talking about how Cubans are known for their cuisines, or is it cuisines? It was like interspersed between those scenes. Amanda, that stuff was so well done. That was great.
That was brilliant. That I really liked. And is this what Fast and Furious is like? Can somebody like level with me? Like, what was the Fast and Furious of it?
I'd say just the fact that they are in this ridiculous situation in cars. Honestly, this was played more straight than any of the last 6 Fast and Furious movies. I'd say they've kind of jumped the shark and have gotten very heightened, even though this is a situation that you can't imagine happening in the real Pete Davidson's life. This is still a little more realistic than what you'd see in a Fast and Furious movie these days. There's not as many jokes in the Fast and Furious movie. Things are kind of taken a little bit more seriously, but at the same time, it's camp.
It felt very camp. This episode felt very camp because I was like, wait, they just killed somebody? And then you kind of circle back where Pete at least acknowledge that that's what just happened, because I was kind of like, wow, this is like a different playing field than the previous episodes where they're like blowing people up.
I would say that people get blown up in Fast and Furious movies, and the only difference is they don't acknowledge it, and they're still the heroes. They're still the heroes in that universe, and there's no criminal charges that are brought upon them. They are the heroes.
Excellent. So it's Florida.
Yeah. Only one of the movies, I think, takes place in Miami. The rest are in other global, maybe lawless parts of the world.
So they're trying to figure out who the rat is, because the paparazzi are showing up at all times. And they realize that it's potentially Amy Davidson, who has been tracking the location of Pete the entire time, which leads us to this B plot that is interspersed throughout the episode between Amy and Casey, Pete's sister. For the first time, we get to see Casey Davidson as an adult in the show, and really well done, played by Una Roche, who Dave talked about on the interview, saying was so fantastic as Casey. And we get to see it a lot here, where Casey sees that Amy's watching them and wants to go out and do something with her mom. They end up going to a restaurant where there's this whole scene where they're trying to get a table, and Casey ultimately tells the hostess that Pete's coming so they can get a table, and they have this really nice discussion, which is sort of interesting at the table, about how Casey, I believe she's saying that she works at a hospital and that she doesn't tell the nurses or doctors that she's related to Pete, because otherwise, they're always going to be asking about him and his dick and all of that stuff. And there's this moment where the hostess comes over and says, if your other guest is not going to show up, we're going to have you lose our table. And then Amy ends up blowing up and saying, I'm the queen of Staten Island. Marissa Tomei played me in a movie. Very, very inside baseball. And there's this, great scene the next day where Amy ends up making Casey some back to school pancakes and promises her to give her some more attention. So it's really the first time we get to see the interaction between mother and daughter here. Amanda, did you enjoy this whole B plot between Casey and Amy?
I loved it. I liked the Marissa Tomei call out also. That was like very funny to see Edie Falco calling out, another wildly famous. Also, all Italians. And I don't even think the Davidsons are Italian. I think that they're Irish. So I like the whole insular Italian of it. It plays very well, obviously, with Joe Pesci, and Staten Island is not at a loss of Italians. So it works well. Yeah, it was really interesting. I thought that the actress, what's her name? To say it again?
Una Roche, I believe.
Okay, Una Roche. She's great. She was really great. So it was definitely interesting to see. I was kind of, there was a lot going on, but.
Yeah. Sammy, how do you enjoy this B plot?
I definitely enjoyed it. The kind of highlight of that sort of interaction was the twist where you find out that she didn't say that they were Pete Davidson's family or mother and sister, and you find out she said like they were waiting for Timothy Chalamet, which I found to be really funny. We're the Chalamets. I just told you we're the Chalamets. So yeah, very brief sort of kind of thing that they were able to give Edie Falco more to do in this episode, and kind of ties in nicely towards the end where she's like, I'm going to be way more involved in your life. I'm being a lot more hands-on, which is definitely not what Casey was looking for out of this whole ordeal.
Yeah, to help Casey find a boyfriend. And we'll see if that continues to develop in the next 4 episodes at any point. I'm sure we're going to get to see Casey a lot more. But back to our A plot, where we ultimately find out from who else but Poppy, Grandpa Joe, who's going to be there. He's going to look through all of the paparazzi photos to figure out who the rat is. Nobody else can figure it out but him. And he finds out that Gilly is the rat and tells Pete to go take care of his boy. So he goes over to him, talks to him, finds out that Gilly just really wanted to get go to third base, was it, with a girl from the Daily Mail. So ended up selling out to the paparazzi where Pete was going to be, sends him home, and then a la Fast and Furious, the Paul Walker song, we get See You Again played as he's walking off. So Sammy, you must have enjoyed that touch.
That was like the cherry on top of this episode. We already got the car chase. He says the line about Shane says the line to Pete about, Pete, we're friends. And he's like, well, this isn't about being friends. This is about family. And which is like a classic sort of Fast and Furious ism. Amanda, Fast and Furious, all the movies are about family, even though only maybe 1 or 2 of the characters in the family are related to each other. So that's a big point. And just the needle drop of See You Again was absolutely just perfect. So again, somebody who loves those Fast and Furious movies for as kind of cheesy as they are, they took the concept or premise of making a mini Fast and Furious movie in this episode, and they kind of took it all the way. So I'm glad they did that. And just the running line of Shane Gillis being like, no, please don't tell Chris Evans about this. Alluding to the line at the beginning of the episode, talking about how they did Whippets with the original Avengers. I guess that clears up who the other original Avenger is in the Whippets scenario. It's him and Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson. So that was a very funny beat.
Anyways, this was really great. And, I guess it was, for all the talk that we're having about Shane Gillis and his role in the show, he's the one that ultimately ends up leaving. So it is interesting to see him no longer a part of the crew. But we do find out the big mystery one night earlier, what happens to Dave Sirus, who is in, I would say, like is it a slap fight back in the, that makes me think of How I Met Your Mother, but basically he's in this what looks like a kitchen at a restaurant, and he's standing in front of this huge guy, and he is there, and the guy punches Dave in the face, and he basically doesn't flinch it over, and we get to see Uncle Roy is there with Dave, which is hilarious. You're so right, Sammy. Uncle Roy has been my favorite character this entire series, and slap him in the face, you weird little man, and slaps the guy and ends up finishing him off, and then yells in Klingon, is this what you want? Because this is what you now have. And it's this great moment where we find out that Dave is this secret warrior. So Amanda, did you enjoy what you saw from your friend Dave Sirus?
Oh, I loved it. It was great. Again, another full circle Curb-esque ending. I really like that, where like there's kind of a loose thread, but you kind of forget that it's there, and then it ends up getting tied up nicely at the end. There's nothing more satisfying to me, and especially a short 24 minute show like that, a full circle moment like that is just the perfect way to end it. And Dave's amazing. I hope he's in more.
I'm sure he will be.
He's really good in the show. It's funny that during our interview, and I wasn't sure if he was being serious, he was talking about how if he were to have somebody else play the Dave Sirus role on the show, he was talking about like Daniel Radcliffe or like Elijah Wood. So I'm imagining those actors in a scene like this. But I think Dave really showed his chops here. And yeah, totally undersold to us in that interview, kind of the things we were going to see him do in the show, which I'm kind of glad they kind of, left some surprises for us. So I'm excited to see if he's got any more, funny moments or absurd things that kind of build on this moment throughout the series.
So that'll do it for episodes 3 and 4 of Bupkis. I'm curious from both of you if you had a preference between these two episodes. So Sammy, did you like 3 or 4 more?
I think 4 for me definitely was my favorite of those two. I found, the cameos in 3 were a lot of fun, between Jon Stewart probably being the MVP there, but the return of Uncle Roy, the inclusion of Simon Rex's Crispy, and the homage to Fast and Furious kind of took the cake for me here. And as far as like funniest episode goes, I feel like this might be up there with episode 1 as the funniest episode. So really enjoyed episode 4. Enjoyed episode 3, but episode 4 was a lot of fun.
Amanda?
I guess I probably have to say episode 3, just because I didn't understand the Fast and Furious elements of it, and that seemed to like be the focal point. But I did really like 4 also, so I'm not really sure. I mean, I watched them back to back, so they're kind of blending together to me. So I like them both. I thought they were actually pretty similar in tone. I feel like we're starting to see, like maybe taking us down the road of like Pete having issues, and like the way that they manifest in his work and like his crew. And I mean, I thought they're both great. I'm gonna go with 3 for the sake of the exercise, but not by much.
Yeah, I would say one big takeaway I've had from these 2 episodes, and now 4 episodes through the show, is a lot about Pete trying to look for inspiration and a father figure that, clearly it's had such an effect on his life. And I just see how important of a figure his grandfather is to him in his life. And it is like, to me, though the relationship between Pete and his mom is fascinating, I think that the relationship I'm enjoying watching the most is between Poppy and Pete Davidson, because I think that they clearly have just such an important relationship, and this story is basically their story. That's how I've been seeing it so far. So I think that that's a fascinating thing to keep watching. I would say I probably liked 4 a little bit more than 3, but for me, I think that 2 has been the best, definitely by far, through the first 4 episodes. 1 is probably the funniest to me, but 3 and 4 have been pretty good. Episode 3 was written by Dan Bula, current SNL writer, as well as Dave Sirus, and Pete and Dan Bula wrote episode 3. So yeah, that's just interesting to watch. I'm sure they collaborated many times, I think, on a lot of the Pete raps, actually, that they did together throughout their time at SNL. Anyways, episode 5 is titled For Your Amusement. Episode 6 is ISO. We're going to cover episode 5 and 6 right here live on Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We will be back with some very special guests to join us to break down episodes 5 and 6, and then episodes 7 and 8 will be on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we will wrap this all up. If you're enjoying the show and our commentary, let us know. Comment on the video or write to us on social media at the SNL Network on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. We want to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoy the bonus coverage here of Bupkis. Sammy, thanks for joining us as always. What's going on with you and where can the listeners check you out?
John, thanks for having me on this extra crispy edition of our Bupkis coverage. You guys can find me many times here on the Saturday Night Network, as well as on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at That Sammy Kay. And of course, please check out all of the superfan takeovers, especially as the writer's strike rages on and you're looking, I mean, I guess at this point, you're not seeing the content drought, but you are seeing an SNL drought. So if you haven't caught up on our most recent superfan takeover, where we talked about our favorite episodes or moments from cast members who come back to host, please go check that out, as well as our other superfan takeovers. So let us know what you think of those.
Yeah, and Sammy, my anniversary is coming up, so if you want to lend me your cock, let me know.
I don't think you want it.
Okay, got it. Amanda, thanks for joining us as well. It's so great to get to talk to you about these 2 episodes. What would you like to plug?
Hard to follow that. Were we? I wasn't. You can find me on
muted.
Instagram. at Barkin Face and at the SNN, and looking forward to circling back next week.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for everybody to joining us today. You can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you want to follow me at Jon Schneider 24, always looking forward to chatting with any of our listeners. All right, for Sammy and Amanda, my name is Jon Schneider from the Saturday Night Network. We will see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.